Savage. What's going on, Savages? Welcome to another episode of the Savage Snowflake podcast with me, Jeff Leach, your daddy, your child, your lover, your brother, your sister, your mother, your friend, your teacher, and of course, your diligent student. Thank you very much for joining me for another episode. It's quite an exciting one for me. I'm going to get into who our guest is and exactly what's going on first. Please excuse the washed out image that you're seeing of me at the moment. Unfortunately, it's the sunniest day we've had here in Los Angeles for a while. I'm not outside getting a tan. Instead, I'm hiding inside trying to work out ways to make my room darker. If that's not a sign of infinite depression, I don't know what is, but it's going to be okay. First of all, let me just give a big shout out to all the new patrons as well. If you are thinking of supporting this podcast in a different way, the best way to do that is to go to patreon.com/SavageSnowflake. We really do rely on you guys to show the love. We got over 30,000 unique listeners now, so thank you very much to all of the listens. But you know what? There's another step of support that you can show us, and that is by donating a little bit of money. Maybe $1, maybe $5. Fuck it. If you're rich, maybe $10 or $20 a month. Think about how much you pay for Netflix now. What, $13? And you probably spend about, let's say, 6-7 hours of solid watch time maybe every month doing that. Well, we do a total of 8 hours of podcast entertainment here every single month for you. It's all done off my own back. No producers, no big corporations. So I rely on people like you to help me out. Anyway, that's enough of the hard sell. Give me some money. Keep me able to do this podcast. First of all, as well, thank you very much to our sponsors. We've got Boundless Technology over here. If you are a vapor, a smoker, a lover of all things good and THC based, you want to check out Boundless Tech. That's BNDLStech.com. Their wonderful website has such an array of incredible kit that will help you get the cleanest and smoothest smoke you can possibly have without any of those carcinogens. If you want to use the Terra, that's the one that I use, or the CF710, wonderful products to smoke your resin, your distillates, and of course your flowers, and vape them rather than smoking them up. You don't want to burn them. You want to get those clear tastes, get all the different cannabinoids, the different heats that you can get. It's got an infinite fucking amount of life. It's ridiculous. I feel like I charge that thing once a week, if that. And on top of that, you can heat it up to any different degree Fahrenheit, all the way up to 434. So you can get all those different flavors that you prefer. If you use code SAVAGE over at bndlstech.com, you're going to get yourself 25% off all of their wonderful technology. You can't say fairer than that. So use code SAVAGE at bndlstech.com. And of course, check out our other sponsors, manscaped.com. Wonderful people over at Manscaped, keeping all of those hairy bits of your bodies, gentlemen, in check. That's right. You got maybe a lady at home who wants to see you naked. Don't shock her with your hirsute downstairs areas. Instead, get their Lawnmower 2.0. Use that to trim your nutsack. Your balls are going to thank you. Your lady's going to thank you. And ultimately, in time, you're going to come to my house and go, Jeff, check these out. Pull your trousers down. I'm going to go, those are some glistening testes. We're going to have a good chat about it. Maybe I'll rub a little linseed oil on it just to keep them primed and ready for action. So check them out, manscaped.com. That's the website address. If you use code SAVAGE when you check out over there on their shop, you will get 20% off all of their wonderful products. You will also get yourself a free, beautiful leather travel bag. It's quite fancy. And you'll also get free shipping on every single order. There we go. That's all our sponsors. That's all the thank yous. And now we can go over to my guest. Joining me today is a wonderful author and a lover of all things comedy. He's a lover of one particular comedian and the author of this incredible biography that has just gone on sale. You're now able to buy this in shops, grab it online. It's about Greg Giraldo, who is, if you don't know, one of my favorite comedians. I think I've mentioned him on a number of different podcasts. He unfortunately passed away. This is Matt Balaker. Thank you so much for joining me,
Matt.
Thanks
for having me,
Good
Jeff.
to have you here, man. And thank you very much for my copy of the book, which is, as you can see, the first page has been opened. You've even signed it, but I've yet to read it, which was partly because I've had an incredibly busy week since we met up last week, and also because I feel like it's going to be more exciting for me to hear about the process of you, why you would write this book, what it is about Greg Giraldo that excites you, and also what the process of learning all these different stories about this wonderful man brought you to understand him in a different way. So, first of all, are you a comedian? Do you do stand-up comedy?
Yes, I am. For about 15 years.
Now, is this something that... Is it a case of going, all right, I think this man's a legend. I've always loved his work, and I feel like there should be more of an honouring of his, posthumous kind of legacy.
Exactly. I'm a comedian, so like most of us have to do other things to make a living.
Yeah, of course.
And years ago, I was working at an office.
I suck dick, man. That's
well,
why.
Okay, well, you got to pay for these monitors somehow. So,
there you go, man.
Congratulations.
That's why they're so small.
I think I was more degrading.
I'm not very good at it.
I had to manage money, so sucking dick would be a step up. I
Dude.
think.
I'm not sure about that. I'd swap out for your profession.
Well, I'm not doing that anymore because, you got to do your own thing eventually.
Yeah, man.
But so I was in my office one day, and I wanted to read about Greg Giraldo, and I went on Amazon, and I figured there'd be a book,
Yeah.
and there wasn't. And
What was the background to that though? You always enjoyed his set. Did you ever get to see him live?
Oh, good question. I did see him live a few times.
Oh,
I saw
so
him.
envious.
I saw him at Melrose, Irvine Improv.
Okay.
But also on the Insomniac tour in
Yep.
LA, and I think 2006-ish.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. And then I met him once, but we weren't friends.
Sure. But he left an impact on you.
He did. And I remember when I got into comedy personally, it was early 2000s, and I watched Tough Crowd, probably like a lot of
Colin
comedy
Quinn show,
wannabes,
yeah.
and he stood out. I mean, I like a lot of. I love Colin Quinn. I love a lot of the
This is
regulars.
the thing. He stood out on everything he appeared on.
Yeah,
Whether it was Tough Crowd or the roasts, the comedy roasts, he was always the most eloquent, the most well versed, and just delivered comedy in such a relentless fucking fashion. He really did have exceptional talent.
he had exceptional talent, and he didn't really promote himself that much, so there wasn't a lot of data on him.
Yeah,
and so he was one of those performers. I was like, what is it? What's his real story? Because I knew he went to Harvard, and I knew he was dropped out of a law career, but that was it. And I knew he had.
I think he was in commercial law,
problem.
was he not? Was he in
Real estate?
Real estate, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew it was a very deathly serious industry that he was in, but also indicative of the vast intelligence he had at his disposal as well.
Yeah.
Why do you think he didn't promote himself? Why was there so little about him? Was it because he hated himself?
That actually might be a small part of it, much more so than I ever would have thought before I started this project. I think it kind of comes down to he loved performing and not much else. When it comes to comedy, I mean, all the other stuff is super necessary, as you know.
Yeah.
But it usually sucks.
Yeah.
Like all the hobnobbing and networking and what have you.
I suck at that. That's where I suck dick. In terms of, trying to pretend like I like people or buttering up the right people. I've always been a little vastly too honest and upfront, I think.
Right.
Which made me...
It probably makes you good at stand-up, but hurts.
Thanks, man. I'll take it. Yeah, it does. It does. But it also is one of the things that tie me to this man. I mean, I listen to one of the only comedy albums that I have on my cell phone, always at my disposal. So when I'm traveling or I get on an airplane flight, even if I even if I'm not going to connect it up, I don't carry around music on there. I use Spotify for stuff like that.
Yeah.
But one album that I have on there that is always on there is Midlife Vices. Which,
good choice.
Yeah, oh fuck yeah. Not only one of the best comedy albums I think ever recorded, and also one of the best live performances too, but it's still prevalent, even though he's talking about George W. Bush in it, the tail end of his, presidency. It's still so much of that album still applies.
Point. Like his topical stuff is evergreen. I mean, you've probably watched the clip of him on Dennis Leary.
Yes,
and that,
picking apart Dennis Leary on Tough Crowd, yeah.
And that was about North Korea, and that's still pretty relevant today. Or you could be George W. Bush swapping whatever president, and much of the same BS still applies.
Exactly, and I mean, it's a hard process. I think I would assume to start to write a biography about someone that you didn't have a personal friendship with.
Right. It is, but it also gives me a little bit of, dare I say, journalistic integrity.
Okay.
But a little bit of distance. I mean, obviously, I went into this as a fan.
Yeah.
I very much am. I never tried to claim
it
was just a biographical piece for information's sake.
Right.
But because I didn't know him, this was my chance to know a lot about him. I mean, I'll never know him, but this is a close second.
Yeah. Do you think the people that you've spoken to on the process, it's always strange. Sorry, my questions are getting muddled because there's almost two parts to it. First of all, he was so desperately loved by so many comedians. He was a comics comic.
Absolutely.
Certainly recognized by the comedy a community, let's say, as one of the best and one of, a legend of our craft. But then by the industry, he had so many, almost made it sitcoms and dramedies and shows and, so many things that should have hit and didn't.
He was never in a Pixar character.
No, exactly. What was the, so I think when it comes to writing a book about a man's life, there will be, I wondered, maybe there was some hesitance from the various people that you spoke to try and fill in the blanks of what this man was, how he came to be, and how he came to, pass away so young.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone, and this is a lesson I learned, we all have our filters. So you could see, you and I could watch something that happened outside, and our stories, our accounting of it, will be vastly different.
Understood.
And that's something I gleaned from interviewing so many people.
And how do you start that process then? If you're coming at it as you did, saying, look, I'm a comic and I really love Greg's work, but I don't know him. We didn't hang out. I'm not a family friend. What's the first port of call for someone who's writing a biography about someone?
Find out who they know.
Right.
And comedy is a pretty tight-knit community.
Yeah.
And so I knew many of the people that performed with him. For example, Kareth Foster, who's a good friend, she kind of grew up comedy-wise in New York City and then moved out here in the mid-2000s. And she knew Rick Dorfman, who was Greg's old manager.
Right.
And I knew that Dorfman was his manager, but I didn't know him.
Right.
So I asked Kareth to vouch for me.
Yeah.
And then so she sent an email saying, this is my good friend Matt. He's a comic I know in LA. Just so it kind of primed the pump.
Grease the wheels a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
And then from there, and I also knew Jesse Joyce a little bit. Like I met him at some shows. I
don't know Jesse Joyce. Who was
he was his feature act. He was Giraldo's feature act for several years, but then became a writing partner. So I think from the Flavor Flav roast on, they worked together.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, I got to check this guy out.
And Jesse's super funny, and he was always cool. And so I figured if he's cool, I heard through the grapevine that Giraldo was friendly. Yeah. So I just sort of assumed that a lot of the people he hung out with were as well, which was generally true.
Have you been to the Comedy Cellar?
Yeah.
They're not all friendly.
No.
This is the thing. It's like, I feel like it's good to have you on to be able to talk about the story of this man's life, because I'm so far removed from it. Like you, objectively, I can look from the outside in and go, I have no relation. I never came up on the New York comedy scene. I really just landed here 3 years ago and went, hi, I'm Jeff. And they were like, who the fuck is this red coat prick in a open shirt with too many rings on?
I thought I was the only one that said that. But luckily, others did too.
No, everyone's thought. Even my own parents say that about me. But you, on top of that, though, I had this very subjective feeling of wanting to connect to a man who's already dead, has no way of being my friend. He might have fucking hated me.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
That's, in a way, that's kind of a relief when you're writing about someone that's not here, because inevitably there's something that they wouldn't like or wouldn't want you to say that way. In this way, I don't have to hear it directly from him.
You don't have to have Greg go, listen, I read the book, and I got to say, man, the way you painted me in fucking chapter 5. I mean, go fuck yourself,
exactly,
Matt. Yeah. So you started reaching out to people who were close with him.
Yeah.
And are they hesitant to share stories?
Rick was, and he was one of the first. And it's because he didn't know who I was. Yeah. And also, they don't really know my angle. And even though I can say I'm a fan and this is a celebration of his work,
you could be talking shit.
I could be talking shit. And it's not as if I have this large library of books I authored. I was just some dude.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of hesitancy, but it was kind of funny. In this instance, which is very unshow business, my lack of acclaim worked to my advantage. Because I think someone said, well, how do I know you're not here to smear them? And I said, I don't have enough influence to smear anyone.
Yeah.
It's not like I Howard Stern or, someone has this platform that millions of people listen to.
Where they could twist words.
Right.
Where they could,
And then I said, I think after talking to me, I knew a lot about him and a lot about comedy. And then they could tell, but there was a little bit of push and pull.
Yeah, it's a lot of charming complete strangers to make them, or at least people who you only know by association.
Right. Well, one lesson I learned, and this probably will help in other areas, and for your those folks out there, sometimes shutting up is the best thing.
Yeah. Oh, I could do with taking that lesson on board a bit more. I don't know if you've ever watched any of the episodes of this podcast, but I talk a lot.
I did a little prep.
Yeah. I'm trying. I have to give myself like a little heads up before I start any episode of the podcast, especially when I'm not high. That always helps. But I always have to just go, just let your guests talk. But today is easy for me because I want to learn more about what you've learned about him. I know Greg as a comic at the Comedy Cellar, a regular there. Filled me with immense pride to have my photo put up on the wall that he's on.
Absolutely, that's awesome.
But then I feel like we would have been really close. But like I say, he might have just thought I was a weird little British flamboyant peacocking prick. But there's something about comedians who have had deep depression as part of their day-to-day life, and also people who've maybe had various substance abuse problems, or dealing with some kind of an addiction, where I think it draws us together to some extent. Every story that I heard about Greg was how incredibly desperately funny he was, but also how he constantly had a voice in his head telling him he was worthless.
Yeah, he even thought about quitting
comedy. Wow.
And it wasn't because he achieved everything. It was because he had episodes where he didn't think he was good enough.
Isn't that fucking mental?
And that I like initially just didn't get. And I still don't completely comprehend, Jeff, but the more people I talk to, you realize what goes on between someone's ears, you have very little, if any, control of.
Yeah.
And people can think these thoughts that are so outlandish, but it makes sense to them.
Yeah, I can empathize with that. People, although, I don't know. Yeah, I know what you mean. When people tell you you're good, it's very easy to go, you're just saying that. You're just saying that to make me feel better.
Right. Or a million people could tell you're great. One person's, you suck. And you're like, oh, I must suck.
And also, Wayne Jones as well worked on the book with you.
Yes.
So how did you, what were your split of roles? How did it work? Was it just both of you out in the field, talking to people, gathering these stories, trying to...
A little bit. And geographically, we are separated. Like, he's in Eastern Canada. And he was a backer like yourself. So thank you for your support.
No worries, man.
And,
I was very proud to do it.
He has a writing background. And also, which came in hugely important, he's an academic librarian.
Right.
And there's so much cataloging and referencing that I didn't know. So he would do some interviews. I probably did more because I did probably 20 before he came on board.
Well, you're a professional orator. So it makes sense that you would do that.
But he was so good at research. So a lot of times, like, I would do an interview. It would be transcribed. He would go through it and figure out what points stuck out.
Right.
And then he often took the first crack out of writing sections of a chapter.
Yeah.
And which was great because another lesson, just get something on paper. It might be garbage, but then you can edit it.
Yeah.
So he was really good at getting something on paper. And then as the months and years progressed, we'd sort of take turns rewriting it. So we'd both do some interviews, get it on paper. He'd do a draft, I do a draft, he'd do a draft, I do a draft.
So you would be sending it almost like a Google Doc that you can both edit.
Yeah, it was Dropbox, but the same.
Yeah.
Same idea.
How do you get the stories? Because let's be honest, outside of adoring the man as a comic, because neither of us knew him personally, but admiring him, let's say that rather than adoring, admiring his work, his body of work. You also have a responsibility when you're writing a biography about someone to go, well, I want to paint the most well-rounded picture, and some parts of that picture are not going to be pretty, and B, you've got to make it entertaining enough that people want to keep reading and don't want to put it down. So how do you balance those two things?
That is such a good question. My approach was to focus on the stories. I figure if I didn't want to get caught up in the words, because you can kill yourself figuring out the most eloquent word. But I think what stories are the most interesting to me, or what stories are the most interesting to Wayne, and then we would base the chapters around those stories.
Yeah.
But you had a good point, Jeff, is like, what do you leave in and what do you leave out?
Yeah.
Fortunately, he was incredibly forthright about his demons.
Yeah.
So I figure because he talked about them and other people knew about him, I could talk about him.
Sure.
But I'm not Kitty Kelly. I'm not.
I have no idea who that is. What's the reference?
She's a biographer who would write about royals.
And she'd dig up all of their dirty secrets.
I've never read them, but apparently there's a lot of dirt, which people want. So that if something I didn't go into gratuitous detail about some of the substance abuse and like how he was administering it and things, because it didn't. To me, it didn't add to the story.
Yeah.
But for instance, we cover how he died, and I think that was essential. I mean, I actually didn't enjoy kind of learning about a lot of it, but it was critical to the story. So if something seemed critical,
he was on the road, right?
Yeah, he was at the stress factory in New Brunswick,
and had been sober for a while. Am I correct, or was he no longer sober at that time?
Well, he wasn't sober when he passed, and
sure.
And I'm not being flippant and saying
no. I understand what you're saying.
He would have these periods, and it was through.
But what I'm saying is that sorry to cut in, but I feel like what I mean to say is prior to the night that he had this overdose, he had been giving sobriety a go again.
From exactly much of his adult life, he was sober. I mean, I don't know the exact proportion, but he would go, I think sometimes 10 months, and this is just anecdotal.
Sure.
And then you slip up and
It was a relapse.
You have a relapse of a few days. So 90+% of the time is completely sober. But as we all know, it only takes one time to kill you.
I haven't had a drink for 3 months, almost 4 months now.
Wow.
And which is, I mean, it's not, I don't think.
Is that just health things or is it
a little of both, I think. Whilst I'm always reticent to call myself, say that I suffer from alcoholism, I think alcoholism is rife in England. It's, binge drinking culture is part of our cultural identity. And I know that I've used alcohol especially for many, many years, for the majority of my life since I was 13, as a crutch, as an emotional crutch. So I decided that I was fed up of doing that.
Good for
Just
you.
hit a point. Thanks, man.
It's hard. Like, I mean, I
hard
stopped
'cause I
drinking
fucking love
during
drinking.
the week. And it was never like in excess, but it was like I have young kids, and when they go to bed, it was like my happy place.
Yeah.
I'd pour a glass of wine, and I just got so used to the ritual.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it never got to the point
mine's
where,
a bottle of vodka out of the freezer.
but it's habitual, and it's like it's hard to snap, but once you do, you learn other ways of coping.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's an interesting point that you just made, which leads me into a different question, but applying to it. How do you? Well, first of all, let's work out whether you're the same kind of broken that I am, like a lot of comics I think are. When I watch, for instance, a movie or a TV series that is very emotionally heavy and dramatic, and maybe there's characters in it drinking or using drugs, it makes me want to get fucked up. Mm-hmm. It makes me want to hurt myself watching other people go through that pain. There's an empathetic part of me that attaches and identifies with it and goes, yeah, I need that. I need to feel like that. I need to damage myself too. When you're doing this and you're having to read stories of a man who you admire hurting himself over and over again throughout the course of his life, were there any moments where you had weakness in yourself, where you went, God, this is making me want to... Did you feel this?
I had several moments, Jeff, where I felt like I'm not going to finish it, or like because maybe it was a matter of identifying with some of the struggles, but nowhere near, I think, the levels. But it was
it's relative, man. It's relative.
It was the self-doubt that we all have. I don't think just performers, but I mean especially comics. When you're up there, it's like there's no perfect joke, there's no perfect set, and there's always going to be someone that doesn't like you. And you know that.
Well, you know it even more now because of Twitter and Instagram and YouTube comments, and
absolutely. But
good friend of mine, a new friend of mine who was a great guy, Brody Stevens.
Oh yeah, no, I knew him too. Yeah.
Big part of why he passed away, I think, is because of that relentless feedback from people who they're not supporters.
And you just want to say, like, who cares? But like again, we don't know what was going in Brody's head. I mean, he was open about, I think, he had bipolar.
Sure, yeah, bipolar depression. But he was back on. It was the medication he was taking again. He spent a long time away from those meds, and then he just started to take them again to try and help with the way he was feeling, and it didn't help. And I think that's what ultimately pushed him over the edge.
Yeah, there's that mind chatter, and we talk about, in fact, chapter 5. It's called Comedian's Mind, and we interviewed some doctors and also this gentleman Jay Dixit, who wrote an amazing article on Psychology Today just months before Giraldo died.
Right.
About failure. And I don't want to... It's not going to ruin the book, but he interviewed... He got in touch with Greg to be the counterpoint to failure.
To be the counterpoint?
Yeah, because he interviewed all these performers, including comedians. But it wasn't just comedians. It was... I was
going to say, surely Greg would have had... That would have been almost like a kick in the teeth, because the man... had so many almost right. Made. This almost came off.
Well, that was the irony of it. He was supposed to be the counterpoint of failure, and the writer didn't know much about him. And 2 minutes into the interview, probably 2 seconds into the interview, it's just like, I suck, I'm a fuck up, I'm this. And he was like, whoa.
You're meant to be the opposite side of the fence, yeah.
But it was so telling that, like, what's happening in someone's mind is so incongruent with what the rest of the world can think. Yeah, that buys again into what I think is a current social climate of only ever sharing our positive achievements, or and often a lot of those are fabricated or the
falsified.
Facebookification of
Yeah,
Like,
Instagram,
look at my great life,
hashtag blessed, and look
best
how
life.
skinny and beautiful and happy my life is.
Well, I'd like to get your thoughts, Jeff. I think many comedians have the opposite problem. It's like they focus on the dreary and what's wrong, and maybe the ideal is somewhere in the middle.
I think I'm a young man in an older a previous generation of comics experience. Does that make sense? So even though I'm 35, which I'm not that super young, but I'm not old yet.
No.
I'm surrounded by comics who are really thriving right now, but I know a lot of them are very depressed or very, but they're very reticent to share just how fucking much they hate themselves because it doesn't fit an industry standard right now. The ones that seem to be flying are the ones that share this kind of, hey, life is great, and oh, whoa, just nailed it. It's the fucking chuckle hut and blah, 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 and whoa, look at this, guys. Hey, out here living it. Whoa, I'm just writing up a story. And it's easy to do that when things are up. Mm-hmm. But when they're down, they just are quiet.
Right.
And then they wait until something good happens, and they go, yeah, just still doing it. And I know it's bullshit, but it ticks boxes. It makes people want to work with you. I can't do that, and I think I'm hoping that in the next 5 years the industry will come back round, or the world will come back round to a more honest place.
That'd be wonderful.
It might be unlikely. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I do think the kind of comics that you're talking about for me are the best comics. Mm-hmm. The ones who do not just revel in the misery, because there's nothing positive about reveling in your self-loathing or your feelings of worthlessness, which a lot of comics do feel. But there is something very ingratiating for me, and it adds another level of empathy and relationship to a comic that I feel every audience member wants to feel, which is, you're being so real with me, I can't help but like you and want to know more about you and listen to your stories, laugh at your jokes, and be part of your journey, man. You know what I mean?
It's like, and that, I think comedy at its best is you're holed away in a room. Maybe that's probably why the Comedy Cellar is so successful. And you feeling like, okay, I'm sharing my secrets, or the comedian is sharing his secrets with us.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate when people bring phones or cameras or whatever and ruin that intimacy.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I think when you watch like a Patrice O'Neill or Giraldo, or a lot of the greats, and many are still alive too, that's when it's at its best. Like Chappelle's good at this. He makes you feel like you're in your living room and he's just opening up, and he's doing it in a very funny, entertaining way, but it's not necessarily for the masses.
No, this was a special experience that was designed just for you. It was like a moment in time that can't be recreated. So what are some of the stories that have come out with their favorites that stuck out for you? Bits of the book, without giving away too much of the book. I want people to go out and buy it.
Sure.
But I think if you're a fan of, let me just say that if you are a fan of comedy, if you've never heard of Greg Giraldo, first of all, educate yourselves, because he really is, for me, he's up there with, the George Carlins, Richard Pryor's, Joan Rivers of the world. He should have been one of the most widely recognized and admired comics out there.
Absolutely. That's why everyone needs to buy the book.
They do.
So he can get the credit he deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. But tell me what some of the, without giving too much away.
There are some that stick out. One was his kind of fiery side.
Right.
By all accounts, he was very gentle and soft-spoken, but if you crossed him, his tough guy side would come out. And that included a fight he got in as a Harvard law student.
Oh, okay.
It reminded me a little bit of Good Will Hunting for some reason.
Right, yeah.
When like some townies kind of, but I mean flipped, because it's like he was the smart kid who's at Harvard, but also had the mentality of a brawler at times.
Right, okay.
And so
he likes them apples mashed.
He does like some apples mashed, and he got in a fight with some dudes who were townies.
Yeah.
And it didn't end particularly well for him.
He didn't fuck him up, no.
Well, he ended up in the hospital.
Okay.
But he had some really funny lines about being resuscitated and what year it was.
Oh, shit. He was like knocked unconscious then, was he? And like...
Yeah. I think he had a concussion. Like, he wasn't comatose or anything like that. But he was knocked out, and it was a cold Boston night. And that was funny because by most accounts, he was gentle.
Yeah.
Like he was not some imposing, he didn't have the build of Patrice O'Neal.
But he was from New York,
Queens,
wasn't he?
yeah.
Yeah, from Queens, and he's even though he went to, everyone knows that this guy wasn't he really bright because he went to Harvard and blah.
Yeah,
but didn't he
in
get
Regis High School,
get some kind of scholarship to get into those places because he was exceptionally bright?
He did for high school.
Yeah.
I don't know for Columbia. He might have got some, but I believe he had to pay at least something.
Sure. But he was like he worked himself out of quite a working class background.
Right. Like he didn't come from affluence, but he did have, by all accounts, like a really stable, dual parent, loving household. And
Really?
Yeah.
See, that's crazy.
Which is counter to what you think for a brilliant comedian.
Yeah,
but
we do not. We differ in that respect. Why did you ever get to the crux of? And I'm sorry, I know you got the story of the. I want to hear a bit more about the.
But they got to buy it to hear others.
They got to buy it to hear the story. There you go. But what it's very surprising to me. What do you, having now spent so much time documenting and looking over the course of his life from childhood all the way up to the moment of his passing? Why was he fucked up? Did he just have a chemical imbalance in his brain? Was it just he had depression and it was something he couldn't stave off?
That would be my, I guess, educated guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was ever diagnosed with depression, but the experts we interviewed said that he had a lot of the warning signs.
Yeah,
or
the markings, the trappings.
Yeah. And another thing that was illuminating is he turned to alcohol and drugs because he was depressed. It wasn't like he had a great show, was on a just mental high, had a few too many drinks, and then felt bad and was hungover, and then he wanted the hangover to go away, and then he overdrank. It was the other way. Something in his mind was not as it should be.
Also, that cycle can become incredibly, of course, addictive, but also, like you say, it becomes habitual that you just go, this is what I do. I've done that for 2 decades at least. Just tiring, really tiring.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I'm not equating my life to his in many aspects, but I lived in LA for a long time, and I don't dislike it. I know it's cool to like hate on it.
Yeah.
But when I left, it was kind of outside of the hyper competitive comedy scene. It was like weight was off my shoulders. Now it's good and bad because those people, some of them are doing really great TV work and are achieve their dreams.
These are the West Coast comics, right?
Yeah. But and I went to the Bay Area for a little while and then Orange County, but to kind of be out of that was I think it was very good for my mental health.
Yeah. See, it's interesting because moving to LA helped me with my mental health.
To get out of New York.
To get out of New York and also in London, just I realized so much of what I've been experiencing was because of, a lack of a healthy attitude towards myself. Mm-hmm. Obviously deep self-loathing, which I'm sure I've got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of therapy work to do over the course of the next decade to get over that. But that's okay. I'm at least on the path towards doing that.
Right.
But also, New York seems to be such an incredible. I had an incredibly naive view of what New York and the comics there were like prior to moving there. I thought this Comedy Center was like the home of utmost positivity.
They'd all help you out when you got to town.
Everyone's so nice, everyone's so into it, and then as soon as they feel a little threatened or intimidated, or as soon as someone tries to fuck you and you turn them down, or as soon as someone whatever, there's a number of different things that can happen, but all of a sudden they come out of the woodwork. They fuck you, Leach, with your cut off sleeves, and I felt like really it's a place where you really get beaten down for any weakness whatsoever, whereas with comics like him and comics like Brody, and I'm not in any way, shape or form placing myself in the same creative brilliance as them. Yeah, I got a long way to go before I hit that place. But certainly in terms of the attitude and the sensitivity, I think that we all shared.
I think sensitivity, I knew Brody decently well. And that was how I would describe him. He was very sensitive and very sweet to people. Even people who didn't necessarily advance his career. And from my interviews and our interviews that Wayne did, I think Giraldo shared that too. He was very willing to help people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a theme of the book, including Jesse, who was his feature act and then writing partner, Jesse Joyce. Greg would go out of his way after the roast to say, Jesse wrote that joke.
Really?
And in a way, he had undercut himself. this.
No, he wanted to pay respect to the guy's work.
And to a guy who wasn't helping. I mean, he was helping. He was very much helping him, but not someone who would necessarily advance his career.
And then the producers would obviously edit that bit out and not put that mention in.
Well, it was usually after the fact.
Sure.
So
okay,
it got out. It would be at the like rap parties.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. He wouldn't like on stage in front of
no.
Shaq and
Yeah.
David Hasselhoff just be like,
Ice-T, that was
yeah,
actually-
you fucking bitch. Oh, by the way, Jesse wrote that, so don't get angry at me.
He didn't do that. No.
And he also became so defined by the roast. I mean, that seems to be outside of maybe people in their 30s and up who may have watched Tough Crowds or he was very synonymous with the roast and being
The roast comic. Yeah.
he was the roast comic. He was the, which ironically now Jeff Ross is Roastmaster General, and Anthony Jeselnik is trying to be a Greg Giraldo, I think, in a lot of ways. But this man, it came so easy to him. Which is almost sounds like it was at odds with his real personality.
Yeah. I mean, what are some of your favorite Giraldo roasts? What sticks out?
Every single fucking one he did, man. Here's the deal. Like, his jokes were always so witty, quick, and acerbic. But they were delivered in such a way that you were like, I can't even be angry at this guy because he clearly hates himself more than the shitty things he's saying about me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was never like, fuck you, Matt. You fucking scum.
It wasn't vindictive.
It was more like, I'm a piece of shit, but you know that because you also fucking did this back when. You know what I mean? It would be like that kind of thing. And that made him very disarming, even when he was being mean. Was there anything about him that was a surprise and a shock to learn about?
Well, one, he was a great guitar player. So
Okay.
that was interesting. But what was really shocking, Jeff, is he suffered from what therapists call the Imposter Syndrome. And it's a disorder or condition where you never think you're good enough.
Yeah.
Like your goals are always...
Don't know what that...
yeah.
No idea what that's like.
But it's quite debilitating because then you achieve something. It's almost like a perfectionist, but a perfectionist has this feeling like I'm wonderful or my work is fantastic, and I have a high standard. Those who suffer from the imposter syndrome feel I'm a fraud, and if I did something that appears good, it's because I faked a bunch of people. And when you saw his body of work and you saw, I mean, just objectively, like how do you get 3 holding deals a year if you're not talented, if you don't have something like that people are, if people are willing to pay you 6 figures to have the option of making a show with you, you're probably doing something right.
Yeah.
And to not recognize that was a huge surprise to me.
Yeah. It's not to me. I think just because I was obviously joking when I said I don't know what that's like. The more I learn about, I'm a bit scared actually because I know when I'm going to read this, it's going to make me really upset in certain places without even having gone through and seen what are the different chapters about. I know there's going to be parts that I desperately relate to, like imposter syndrome, depression, abuse of hurting yourself because you don't think you're worth anything to anyone, and that scares me a little bit because it's a very, sometimes seeing people around you. Look, it's like Artie Lang. Artie Lang really terrifies me because I think the man is brilliant and incredibly talented.
Whenever I watch Crashing, I feel that like
the guy's just fucking, he's brilliant. In everything he touches, he's brilliant. Whether it's just being, bullshit and fucking gregarious on a podcast. We've done podcasts together on Compound Media a lot, and always just so fucking funny. Just saying shit. But then also, like you say, in the acting roles he's done, and which are very close to home, on something like Crashing on HBO. But I'm terrified of Artie hurting himself because anytime I see someone who I identify with, I got to touch wood. I just hope to fucking God that he pulls through what he's going through, and we don't have to sit here in in another year's time because you've written a biography
he already wrote a book,
Artie.
so yeah. I mean, actually, it's job security.
Okay, but what I'm saying, that would really be a crying shame. But then I look at someone like Giraldo or Brody and feel so identifiably connected to them. It scares me, man. It scares me seeing comics like this.
There's more good.
Not because they're so good and I think I'm as good as them, because I think they're so damaged and I feel as damaged as them. And it really scares me because they're all fucking dead.
Right.
They're all fucking dead. And I'm like, well, how long is it until I have some terrible news that pushes me over the edge? And I go, well, fuck it. I'm going to go and, go and get a load of pills and a couple of bottles or something. And then, the girl I'm dating comes and knocks on my door and I don't answer and they open my door and I'm laying on the fucking floor.
Right.
Well,
hopefully this podcast will come out before that.
If they do, find me like that. I want you to write the biography.
I will. Well, you're talking about it, Jeff.
I want you to care enough to write the biography.
I will.
I haven't done enough. No one's going to give a shit about reading that book either. And that's the point.
That'll propel you.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness,
what you're saying is the only way for me to really make it in comedy is to just hurry up and die. And then the minuscule outpouring for Brody got...
You'll get a hashtag.
Yeah, Brody got a hashtag, had a
least.
few thousand retweets, He got at least a third of the comedy community reached out. But I reckon I could get at least 1/8 of decent comics, at least tweeting it. Do you know what I mean?
I do. But you're talking.
Yeah.
And it's easy to focus on the too many that have died prematurely. But, nowadays, mental health is a discussion point.
We are in a different time.
A few years ago, it wasn't. And I'm not saying, well, it's all going to be fine, Jeff, in 2 years. I don't think that. But at least it's out there. And people know that it's something that's in our heads, but there's hope. Yeah. It's treatable. It's almost like if you broke your leg, you can't just wish it away. There's steps we've taken, and I think it's kind of come out a little bit more. And not just comedians, but the population at large. I think it's the stigma is not as severe as it was.
You're sure? Yeah, you're right. And also the comics that I mentioned that I always cite as me identifying with. To be honest, they all came from. I just missed out on their generation of the attitudes towards something like mental health. I'm not scared to talk about it because I know that if I didn't, I'd still be drinking every day and I'd be taking a lot of drugs every day and potentially be dead by now.
Right.
So I was okay about going, it's all right. Whereas, like my dad can't flip-flops back and forth between even acknowledging he has a drink problem or not. Mm-hmm. Whereas I can go, nah, it was too much and I was going to die. So let me stop that. And let me talk to some people and open up about it. But it's so frustrating, isn't it? Some of these people. But then that's why I say someone like Artie, because he's still of that old school generation where you just fucking get on with it. Even if your nose fucking caves in, you go, fuck it.
Suck it up.
Yeah, suck it up, pussy. Do you know what I mean? And he will say that. And I'm like, you don't need to suck it up. Like, it's okay that you're fucked.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. I'm going to read it with I think a very mixed set of feelings. I'm excited and full of joy that I'm going to get to learn infinitely more about this man. I mean, my two favorite autobiographies or biographies of comics. One was an autobiography, Born Standing Up. Steve Martin's.
Great book. Yeah.
Incredibly
amazing.
And the other one is what is it? Final Words. The George Carlin one, which wasn't written by him, but was written in based on a series of recordings that his friend, the author of the book, they used to talk at length about all of the stories, and they were documenting his life through conversation and through sharing stories that were all recorded with a view to writing an autobiography.
Okay.
And with his friend as the ghostwriter, I guess, or something like that. And once he passed, he was like, well, I already have this wealth of material. He wanted to write this book. Let me write this book. So it still very much was written in his own words.
Uh-huh.
How much of that were you able to put into this as well? Because there are, I'm assuming, once you trawl through the numerous hundreds of hours of live performance, conversations, appearances on TV shows, and I know he was prior to the podcast era, really. Right. But there would be documented.
He was on Opie Anthony and Howard Stern. There's lots of radio archives of him.
How much of his own words features in the book?
Good. Probably 15%.
Okay, that's good.
And if it's not his words, it's people's recounting of his words.
Yeah.
For instance, I loved his jokes so much that I found myself almost going the reverse. Like, after I learned all this information, I think what joke fits in with this, or I should say, like, I wanted to figure out, based on the jokes, I would ask questions that would be a little bit telling of his mindset at the time.
Yeah.
And so we have jokes about marriage. We have jokes about him.
We had
divorced.
2 failed marriages, right?
Yeah. Yeah, his first one, he was like 23, and it lasted less than a year. I was with his essentially high school girlfriend, and they dated in college and throughout law school when he went to law school. And that was sad because when she met him, he was the studious attorney in training, and she was a dental student.
Yeah.
And so it was like
and then she broke him and turned him into a fucking comic.
I kind of think it was the other way. Like we weren't able to interview her. She very much distanced herself from him. But I think it was she.
Do you
had
know why that was?
I can talk off the record.
Okay, sure, yeah.
That I will, but I'm not. So when we're not recording,
she wasn't comfortable reliving that part of her life, maybe, or
yeah. And he wasn't always the best husband.
Okay, yeah, okay.
And I think part of that was he was finding out what he wanted to do career-wise. And she was probably like, I have my career. You're a lawyer. We'll settle down and have 2.5 kids. You know,
and make some good money and live in a,
Yeah, and you want to give this up to tell dick jokes and sell chicken wings.
But
like
what dick jokes they were.
I know. So in that sense, I get her point of view. But yeah, what dick jokes they were, Jeff, exactly.
I always admired that. I always admired that he could go seamlessly from, and that's something that I'd try and put into my own sets, go seamlessly from talking with great intelligence and eloquence about political climate or, social climate, and then go into a bit about, Puerto Rican Day Parade and girls with 3 thongs knotted up, hanging out the back of their arsehole on the back of a Kawasaki motorcycle. Like that was... I was like, this is what the everyman. He was the everyman, the incredibly bright everyman.
Yeah.
You take grand ideologies, grand ideas, either political or social ideologies, but then reduce them down to simple banter that you might have in a local dive bar with your buddy.
It was like everyone was in on it, and I think that's something I miss today in comedy, where you could have differing viewpoints in the same audience.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like you're right, you're wrong, you're this or that. And he could tell jokes that would make people question their own beliefs, but they'd still laugh. And it wasn't so much like this, university course. It was just it's fun. But I think it's also cool when something can be fun and it kind of tweaks your mind a bit.
Yeah.
But
if you walk away from this,
you're not beat up by it. You're like, you don't think like me, therefore you're an awful person or you're this or that. It's like,
I would have loved to have seen how he would have performed during this time.
Yeah. How do you think
America.
it would have changed, if at all?
I can only relate it very subjectively to what I'm looking at. I used to be incredibly left wing and be very vehemently against the overt conservative attitude.
Right.
And I think Trump's a cunt, but I also don't think that everyone who voted for him is a cunt.
Right.
And performing in Vegas has amended how I tell those stories, because Vegas is a very red state.
You see there are people from different viewpoints.
And also you got every fucknut from middle America who thinks that gambling their child's college fund away is the idea of a perfect cultural holiday. So they're not really, let's be honest, they're not going to be the brightest people in the world, all of them in the audience. No. But they're people who want to laugh and want to be taken away from their problems and have a little escapism that we can afford them as comedians. So I still tell the same jokes that some of them are a little bit politically shitting on what their ideologies and their political outlook might be, but I make it about there's fucking lunatics on both sides. Mm-hmm. There's crazy people everywhere. Let's laugh at some of the crazy and come together, I think he would have done that, I hope. I think that's where he would have gone.
And I think comedy's gotten so siloed.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so categorized and subcategorized. It's kind of cool to have performers that can do the opposite.
Did you come across Stonewall's? Obviously it sounds like his first wife wasn't really interested in contributing anything or talking much about their relationship. Were there any other parts to the story you would have loved to have gotten or be able to explore more, but you couldn't just because people went, sorry mate? this is not something I want to get into.
Yeah, I mean, some of it was just a matter of not being able to access the people.
Because of fame's sake, or
maybe, or I think more often, Jeff, it was just their schedules.
Yeah.
You know, especially like a lot of the Comedy Cellar guys, I think it was Keith Robinson. For some reason, I was really excited to talk to him, and then
he had a stroke. To be fair,
it was before. But
to be fair to Keith, mate, you did hit him up when he was in hospital, and I mean, I feel like that was a little bit. And you were like, "Listen, I need you to exclusively write down some notes with your left hand." He was like, "Motherfucker, I can't move my left hand," and you're like, "Well, that's selfish, Keith."
But still, this is for Giraldo.
It's for Giraldo.
I
you
might
could
make
try,
a couple bucks
dude.
off of it. So come on, stop being so.
No, this was before he'd had his health issues.
That was one, and some of his high school buddies. There was one in particular, and I'm not going to say his name because he's not a celebrity.
Steve.
Steve was cool. Steve was super cool.
Steve was all right.
This other guy, but you heard from others, and it kind of reminded me of being in high school again. It's like, oh, well, they were super cool, and then they lost touch, and then maybe rubbed him the wrong way at one instance,
Sure.
20 years later, and then he died. And it kind of makes these arguments that are kind of petty seem. And I'm talking about my own life, you know, like people I might have an argument with years ago, but I would have liked to know a little bit more.
Matt
about,
holds a grudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I hope not to.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah.
you asked me what I'd like to learn more about him.
Yeah.
Probably.
Or just past the
high
story
school.
that you wish you could have fleshed out even more.
Some of his high school days, because he was at such a smart school, Regis, and also, I mean, this was 40 years ago or whatever. You know, it was just hard to track these people down. But I really wanted to know, like, what type of student was he like in high school? And I got some, and we also got to talk to his girlfriend. But it would have been cool.
Did you get any teachers from that period, or you know, there were school friends that you managed to
there was
track down?
Several school friends, including his. I don't know if it's his first girlfriend, but one of his first
Definitely one of his formative.
Yeah, and she contributed some pictures.
Okay, nice.
And
Dick pics. Dick pics.
That's not really not prom pictures.
Okay.
They're quite classy, but yeah. But that would have been fun to learn more about.
Yeah.
And also,
It's quite a formative time for someone, isn't it?
yeah. And no one in college, I shouldn't say no one, very few people said he wanted to perform. However, his high school girlfriend told me that they would go to comedy shows together.
Really?
So like it kind of shows like
the seeds were already there.
Yeah. What you project to your bros is going to be different than what you tell your lady.
Yeah.
And so I guess a piece of advice, if you're doing a biography about a man, interview his girlfriend.
Holy fucking
straight,
shit, mate. I did a documentary called Confessions of a Sex Addict, where I tried to...
Nice.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it was trying. It could have been a better documentary. It was good, but it could have been even better. But it was about the process of trying to work out whether I was a sex addict because I'd had such a horrendously hoary, promiscuous
you yourself.
part.
Oh,
yeah, so it was an immersive documentary. But in that, I went through and we tried to hit up... There was a list of about 600, 500 at that point, I think, women. And we were trying to track down so many of them. And like the first girl that I ever slept with just didn't want to be... And we really went hard to track her down. We found her parents' old address and we reached out to them. We had to write a letter and then they responded to an email and then blah, blah, blah. And they reached out to their daughter. And I can't even find her like online on social media. I really want to know where she's at, what's going on in her life. I don't know her story. And it really breaks my heart because I feel like I was shit, but she was also shit. And I want to know how our shittiness... Like she'd already fucked a couple of older guys in their 20s. And I was like 16 and she was older than me, maybe 17. And it was the first time I had sex. And, it was 2 minutes of embarrassment where, and we never slept together again. We weren't even together. It was really weird. But I wanted to know, like, anyway, when you're trying to flesh out your past like that, especially those formative years, it can be really trying because people go, that's not part of my... They don't want to reminisce. Even by association, they don't want to reminisce.
It's in the past, and sometimes it's best.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I discovered that people will share what they want, and sometimes they'll overshare.
They'll be selective.
They'll be selective, but that's why it's important to have multiple sources and corroborate, and don't rely too much on one person because then it'll be so heavily skewed. Your story might be really off.
I'm sure there were plenty of people as well, because this is, a nature of our industry. because you're a public figure now, people will come up to you and go, hey man, can I get a photo? Blah, 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 blah. And you might just had a really shitty day or something and go, be like, I'm so sorry, man. I'm just like, not right now. Like, especially if you're going through shit.
Yeah.
Over the course of your adult life, which he clearly did. And, but then someone can come up to you the very next day and be like, hey, and they'll go, oh, this guy's a great guy. He's so friendly, blah, blah, blah.
Right,
And someone else will be like, nah, he's a fucking arsehole.
I saw him 28 hours ago and he told me to fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have to moderate some stories then and go, oh, well, I'm going to mark that down to, this was a period where he was going through something, and the story that was being shared by that colleague or employer or ex or whatever, it doesn't really apply because I don't think it matches the bigger picture of who this person is.
Yeah, because they were small, I can't remember all of them, but there were some where, if he's this way 9 times out of 10, we'll focus on that.
Yeah.
This, we've all had a bad day. We've all, one thing, it's pretty innocuous, but we talk about some of his bad sets. Like when he's probably, if not the most consistent comic ever, one of them.
Really?
But even the best have some bad sets. And we talk about what was going on personally that might have contributed to that. One was after a Letterman appearance that didn't go as well as he would have hoped. And that was kind of interesting because I'm sure in those audiences, there was a few people who've never heard of him before. And right now, if you asked him, Jeff, they'd be like, Greg Giraldo, he was okay, or he kind of sucked. And it's like, what? You just saw one or you heard 2 bad jokes or something like that.
Yeah.
Don't base it off of that, but it's gonna happen.
Did anyone really dislike him? Did anyone have and are cited in the book? Was anyone, because I know it's a book of celebration of the man's life.
There are some people who just said I don't want to be interviewed, or some I kind of read between the lines.
What about O'Leary? Did he ever talk about him? Did he?
He did, and it was I thought Leary was pretty cool because he was interviewed or Give It Up for Greg Giraldo, which was a piece or was a show that Comedy Central did.
Yeah.
About 6 months after Giraldo passed, and Leary had very little to gain from it, and he said I looked like a douchebag.
Is this from the recorded interview, or is this you having a conversation with him for the book?
Well, that was a recorded interview.
I've seen the recorded interview where he says, I was being a douchebag, and he fucking called me on it and went so hard on me, and I was out of my depth. Like, he says that, Greg prepared for everything he went into. So he was there, boom, 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 boom. And everything I said, he just made me look like more of an asshole.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to be able to say that is kind of,
humbling.
And ballsy on Leary's part.
Yeah, or you just don't want to look like more of a dickhead by going, yeah, fuck that guy, man. He didn't really.
That's true, and that whole incident was funny because we had several accounts of people who talked to him afterwards, and I don't think Giraldo thought it was going to be this huge television event that it became.
Sure.
They had arguments every day, Jeff, on Tough Crowd, and this was a little more pointed.
Yeah,
but whatever. And some told me that Greg never really patched it up with Leary, and others said he had no beef and it was fine. Yeah. So that was an instance where the
jury's still out.
Because I didn't know definitively, Wayne and I made a point to tell that their sources vary on
whether they
what really
came
happened.
Back to, yeah.
And that's kind of part of the fun too, is like not everything's answered, and I think it would be kind of boring if everything was, because I like reading something and then makes me wondering a little bit more. I mean, a lot of questions are answered, but then there's some that will never be answered.
Did he ever do anything with that passion for playing music as well? Because I didn't even know that. The other day, I just discovered Mark Maron plays guitar very well.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
He was on Comedy Jam, Josh Adam Meyer's show, here at the Whiskey A Go-Go, I think it's called.
On Sunset?
Yeah.
Cool.
We went down there, and he got up and just fucking rocked out.
Too talented, man.
Yeah, we pulled a guitar. I was like, but then also Mark Maron, of course he plays guitar. Of course he sits in his garage and interviews Barack Obama. Of course he fucking jams on the weekend. You know what I mean? Like, of course he does. But Greg, it was almost like reticent.
He had some like open mic gigs, and actually he and some of his frat brothers started a band in college, and we documented that.
Cool what?
They were pre-name.
Pre-name.
They didn't have a name yet. They had a set list, but they didn't have a name.
Okay, all right. So there's a little bit of that story in there as well.
Yeah, so I think he had the performer's bug.
And how do you think people... So if people have never heard of Greg, if they've never experienced any of his comedy, obviously go out. Just fucking get online.
Yeah, go on
Google.
YouTube or Google, yeah.
And watch, and you'll go down a rabbit hole on YouTube and you'll end up, 20 videos in going, I fucking love this guy. And listen to Midlife Vices as well, guys. Honestly, I can't... It's one of my favorite albums of all time. What do you think the takeaway would be for people once they read this book? What's the picture that is painted of him across the...
That... Aside from comedy, he was a very willing mentor and a helpful person, and he had his demons and was very upfront about them. And I think he pursued something that the odds were against him, and he succeeded.
But in his mind, did he ever really succeed?
Yeah.
God, it's so sad, isn't it? Well, I'm glad he's got a big beaming smile on the cover. I honestly, man, I could talk about him for another 2 hours, but I feel like we've got a good basis of what the book is. We've done our hour.
We can do another one after you read it.
I'd fucking love that, man. And I'd like to, I'm also, actually, sorry, before we wrap it up, I'd like to ask, this is more just for the viewers who are going to go out and purchase this. And first of all, where can they get it?
The easiest way is Amazon.
Okay.
Or you can go to greggiraldobook.com.
Okay.
Or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's at Greg Giraldo Book.
Okay. And it's called Greg Giraldo, A Comedian Story. And also, just again, for the people who are going, oh, well, maybe I'll buy it. Let's also add a little bit of zhuzh to it, a bit bougie. What kind of names can we expect to see stories from in here? What are the people from the comedy world that they would know if they don't already know Greg's work?
Mark Maron.
Okay, there you go.
We talked about him. Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah,
he's
never heard of him. Yeah,
Colin Quinn.
Never heard of him.
The legend herself, Judy Gold.
There you go.
But also Greg's wife, Marianne.
Yeah.
Some of his.
So this was his second wife that he had.
They were married 10 years.
Okay.
In fact, they were married when he separated, but still, like, they hadn't completed the divorce
when he passed away.
And gosh, Jessica Curson, Noam Dworman, for those who
Jessica
know.
Curson is one of my favorite people in the fucking world, by the way. She's a comic that I think is going to leave that kind of a legacy too.
And
not for any time soon. I hope she doesn't die for another 50 years or 60 years. But
well, she was the interview that might have surprised me the most because I didn't know that much about her beyond her stand-up.
Right.
And I had no idea she and Greg were that close, but they both shared like addiction troubles.
Yeah.
And what she said was so illuminating.
Yeah.
So that's
yeah, well, she's
her interview alone
is
worth the purchase.
Yeah. Yeah, Jessica Curson, I think, is going to be one of the greatest talents comedy scene for a long while. She's starting to get the recognition she deserves now as well.
And then Jeff will be right there behind her.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. I hope so. That'd be nice. Oh, Jeff Ross. No. Okay. I actually, you know what, man? I'm sorry to keep eking it on a little bit, but there's one other thing I do want to ask, just because you brought it up in that bit. There is quite a bit of, sharing from his second divorce, or they were going through the process of divorce, his second wife. That's hard, talking to someone who I'm assuming had a relationship with him that was both probably full of lots of love and admiration and some great stories, but also marred by a lot of misery and disconnect. Otherwise they wouldn't have been going through a divorce, right. I'm sure. How do you talk to someone who is that personally involved in the man's life, clearly will have a dearth of knowledge to give to you, or not dearth of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge, but then maybe also has a dearth of pleasantries in lots of ways, because she, as much as she would still have had love in her heart for him, she'd probably have a lot of anger and hurt and upset.
Absolutely. I think the best way to talk was to listen. I mean, that sounds trite, but I was nervous about talking with her. Yeah,
fuck yeah. Because if you fuck that up or say the wrong thing, she might just go, you know what? I can't do this. This is too...
Exactly.
Too
and she
fresh
had
and personal.
Very little to gain.
Yeah. She's not in the industry. She's
lived her life. She's a great mom. She's moved on. And as you said, she had a lot of pain and a lot of great memories. And that's always going to be the case. But I think... truly listening to her answers and then asking questions based off of what she said.
Yeah.
Because I had a list going in of what I wanted to ask. And fortunately, we did hit many of them.
Sure.
But
you kind of pushed that to the side and just let her dictate where it flowed.
And it ended up flowing. Like, I thought she would be very protective of him.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he's passed. However, she was very forthright. And I think that was important because I came in, and I still am a huge fan, but it wasn't to canonize him.
Yeah.
And I probably went in a little too naively. And to hear her talk about she loved him, but she was incredibly frustrated because he'd sometimes miss appointments, or, she'd have a drink and he'd always want to have another one. It changed my way of thinking because I viewed him so much as this amazing performer, and I held him on a pedestal, but I was like, you know what? She had to deal with a whole different side.
Yeah.
And it made me think of people like loved ones who have to deal with addiction.
Yeah.
And she loved him.
Well, addiction doesn't just affect the person.
No, not at all.
It affects everyone around them.
And she had to take care of kids too.
Yeah.
So it's like you can only worry so much about your adult husband when you've got 3 kids to take care of too.
Yeah.
And he was a good father, but you can be a good father or a good person and have these struggles. But when you're talking to someone who's being that open, I think it's important to let them know if they're uncomfortable talking about something to not push it. Because I had your fear. I had that fear you said, Jeff, is like, it could be 5 minutes in. And
you say the wrong thing, you push the wrong button, and she just shuts down.
I'll say some stupid joke that I think would be like ingratiating, or luckily I didn't do that, but like just do something, some silly tick, and all of a sudden the whole interview is ruined.
Yeah.
And I think just to the best you can, make them feel comfortable, and know when to back off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to read her accounts in here. I feel like you probably got some great stuff out of her, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Come and chat to me. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we got a proper hour to really get into it.
Yeah, and I feel like this is therapeutic in a way, too.
Oh, yeah? Nice. Well, I hope I don't die anytime soon, so you don't have to write a book about me. But I am 100% going to be reading this immensely quickly, and I'm going to power through it over the next week or so. Ladies and gentlemen, check it out, please. It's called Greg Giraldo, A Comedian Story by Matt Balaker and Wayne Jones. The forward is by Colin Quinn. You've obviously got amazing comedians in there who are superstars, and maybe lesser known names who are very, very dear friends of him, plus all of those other relationships like ex-wives and managers and girlfriends and high school buddies in there. So I think it's going to paint a really beautiful picture of what the man's life was. And if you haven't also listened to him, please just go and download an album. This is what I would do. This is the way I'd approach it. Okay. I'd go on Amazon right now and I'd download Midlife Vices, and I download this book. Perfect. I'd order the book, and I would listen to the album, which you can do over, an hour somewhere. Just stick it on when you're commuting to work or something, and laugh your fucking tits off, and then read the book and find out more about what was behind that brilliant comedy. But first of all, Matt, thank you very much for writing it, man.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad someone told his story. Yeah, dude, it made me very proud to do that, and I'm very excited to read it. So thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. And I hope we get to hang out again.
Please.
Take care, guys. I'll see you next time.